Well, for pastors and their families, the Sabbath, Sunday, is rarely about rest. If rest is meant as departure from the busyness of our work lives and responsibilities. I was a preacher's kid for several periods of my childhood, so I remember always getting to church early because Dad needed to be there. And this is what I attribute my compulsive earliness to. My sisters and I moved chairs as needed. We folded bulletins that had been printed the day before on the Gestetner. If you don't know what a Gestetner is, Google it. It's a very messy way to produce a bulletin. And we did other tasks. And we were often the last ones to leave the church and possibly had to do lockup too. Especially during our years living in Ottawa, we regularly had guests for Sunday dinner. So that was not restful for Mom. Particularly that one Sunday when Federal Justice Minister John Turner spoke at our church and then came to our house for roast beef dinner. We were all nervous and not feeling restful. Some months ago, when I was at church here early, because I was on greeting duty, the Reimer family arrived well before the rest of the congregants. Teenagers Safi and Yasha looked tired and a little grumpy, and I shared my empathy over the trials of being preacher's kids who had to be at church early. The work of bringing people together for worship on a Sunday is not really rest at all, even if it's fulfilling. It can involve late nights of finding the right opening prayer and practicing the hymns. It involves arriving early to make sure the walkway is not icy, the heat is turned on, and the coffee is made. For the person offering a meditation, it means possibly weeks of pondering, writing, and yes, the stress of getting up here. Thanks to everyone who made this morning possible. So in order to properly rest on the Sabbath, perhaps we should have all stayed home in our jammies with a good book. So a shout out to those of you online who are still in your jammies. Well, what memories do you have of Sabbath in your household? And I'm glad to hear there's going to be an opportunity to share those stories. What sets the day apart? Is there anything other than church attendance that makes the Sabbath special, different, or restful? And what do we mean by rest? Is it physical and mental quiet? Is it avoiding activity that we define as work or labor? Is it self-care? Is it a divergence in how we spend our time, a change of routine, a letting go of the should and the must? Is it a pause that allows us to build energy for further creation? Is it about relationships? I think it is all of these, and hence my themes: rest, redirection, and relationships. The Bible has a lot to say about rest. In Genesis and Exodus, the reason for honoring the Sabbath is based in the creation story, that we are to follow God's example and rest on the seventh day. God rested, so we also rest. This was a declaration of the need to rest after a job well done. It is about the need to step back, rest, and reflect on what has been done in the week before, and gather energy for the next tasks in the week ahead. In Deuteronomy, the reason for honoring the Sabbath is in remembrance of the Israelites' liberation from enslavement in Egypt. Freedom from enslavement meant rest. This is what the Jewish people honor in their varying degrees of abstention from work. One Jewish source I read told me that Shabbat rest is also necessary so that sustained creativity is possible. We must rest so we can continue to create. In the Bible, rest is encouraged. In God we will find rest, as the psalmist says. And one translation I read said, God leads us beside restful waters, although we're more familiar with still waters. God is rest itself. So rest is indeed just that, intentional physical and mental rest from the busyness of our lives, whether that is our jobs, our household tasks, our addiction to phones and laptops. In our society of the past, Sunday, the Christian Sabbath, was set apart from the regular work week by the closure of stores. Anyone remember? Rest from shopping ended in 1992 in Ontario, following an action by the Supreme Court of Canada to strike down the federal Lord's Day Act, which made it an offense to transact business on Sunday. And the court ruling stated, to the extent that it binds all to a sectarian Christian ideal, the Lord's Day Act works as a form of coercion inimical to the spirit of the Charter and the dignity of all non-Christians. Well, this is true enough and reflects our multi-faith society, but it also eliminated one thing that helped us to rest. Of course, now we know that online shopping happens day and through the night. Yet we still have many signs at old order Mennonite businesses and farms that say, no Sunday sales. They take the Sabbath literally and are probably napping. For farming families, Sundays were and still are taken seriously as a departure from the rest of the week. This was true in Paul's family. He said Saturday was extra busy so we could have Sunday off. His mom baked up a storm of bread and buns so that kitchen labor on Sunday was minimal. And especially when supper was a light meal, they called it faspa, of bread and cheese and pickles. On Sunday, the minimum of chores was done, and church attendance was inevitably followed by the afternoon nap. My in-laws' Low German dialect called it Mittagsschlaf, midday sleep. The Sabbath was the only day of the week for such a rest. I have spent most of my career researching and writing about the histories of Mennonite women. There was little rest to be found in their past lives, even on Sunday. I'm overwhelmed by their labor that produced and raised many children, labor that created bountiful tables of food and preserves, labor that kept houses clean and gardens neat. Saturday became a busy and exhausting day because of the need to reduce Sabbath labor. One British Columbia man wrote this about his mother, quote, on Saturday she baked 6 pans of svibak, dinner rolls, 12 loaves of bread, butterhorn rolls, cinnamon buns, and pies. Except for the bread, most of these were consumed by Sunday night. So there was no Sabbath rest from eating, and there were 11 in that family. It is good to be reminded that one person's rest might depend on another person's exhaustion, and that can be extended to many sectors of our society. I think for many Mennonites, rest does not come easy. We are a task-oriented people who love productivity and often have a little should angel whispering in our ear. I really should do this or that or more. We were validated by the mid-19th century hymn, work for the night is coming. Work through the morning hours. Work while the dew is sparkling. Work mid springing flowers. Work when the day grows brighter. Work in the glowing sun. Work for the night is coming, when man's work is done. It was actually written by a woman, Annie Coghill, but she didn't get credit until recently. Contemporary notions of rest include the concept of wintering, which I read about recently in Catherine May's book, Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. Well, May's book is mainly about responding to difficult events in one's life. The notion that the winter months compel us to partake of necessary rest is a good one. And surely we all feel right now that we are in the depths of winter. Joanna Pizzulo from Carleton University, who founded the Reading for Well-Being Community Book Club, says we should try replacing negative language about winter as something to be dreaded or endured with more appreciative language. Maybe something like, "Isn't the sun sparkling beautifully on that piece of ice I'm about to step on?" Winter can provide an opportunity to rest, restore, and recharge. We have only to look to hibernating bears as evidence of this. Sabbath can do the same. One reader of Wintering offered that instead of setting New Year's resolutions that demand rigor, discipline, and refrain, starting the year more gently can better help to care for and repair ourselves from our overstimulated world. Some people are looking to the Danish practice of hygge, H-Y-G-G-E, which dates from the 19th century and continuing the Danish theme. One definition of hygge is taking time away from daily tasks, from the daily rush to be together with people that you care about, to relax and enjoy life's quieter pleasures. It is from a Norse term meaning protected from the outside world, which sounded an awful lot to me like in the world and not of it. Another English version is coziness of the soul. It often means eating a meal together with others and unwinding. Of course, there is now a whole consumer culture around hygge that includes cuddly blankets and candles. And I'm actually looking forward to experiencing hygge with a group of friends in the coming week. And I just love saying that word, hygge. But we need to remind ourselves that Sabbath rest is not just self-care. Sabbath rest may also be about redirection, a change, using the Sabbath time for a different purpose. And this may mean different things for each of us. It might mean rest from routine, which coming to church is. Redirection on the Sabbath could also be about performing life-giving tasks that sustain our creativity. I think of Sarah Decker Thielman, a Mennonite midwife who aided the birth of over 1,400 babies in her career that spanned half a century, from Siberia in Russia to northern Saskatchewan to Vineland, Ontario. When babies are ready to enter the world, they don't wait for Sabbath to end. Both midwife and mother labor to birth the child, no matter what day of the week it is. And Sarah recorded all the births that she attended from 1909 to 1941, and many of them were on a Sunday, and sometimes more than one on a Sunday. This was her service to others. So redirection might mean doing works of good as Jesus healed. It is increasingly difficult to rest when we watch the world in so much pain, when there is injustice, genocide, inequity, homelessness every day. We may feel guilty resting when the world needs action, not contemplation. But as Jesus healed the man's hand, keeping the Sabbath is also about knowing when doing something non-routine is what is necessary. We can participate in a vigil or a protest, pray for those who are suffering, write letters of advocacy. Perhaps the Sabbath is exactly the day reserved for this care for and about others, balancing the rest we need for our own wellness and sustained creativity with a redirection towards the pain of others. But this does not mean scrolling the horrors on social media, but turning away from it to be more creative in our thought and action. Theologian Walter Brueggemann says the Sabbath is about withdrawal from the anxiety system of Pharaoh, and I only think the online world is sometimes like the anxiety system of Pharaoh, the refusal to let one's life be defined by production and consumption and the endless pursuit of private well-being. A redirection from all of that, even for just one day of the week. The passage from Matthew reminds us that God's yoke is easy and God's burden is light, even while God is at work in the world through us. God encourages us to also carry our burdens lightly. Rest is also about relationships. Building relationships in our family, with our friends, in our community, mostly face-to-face, preferably around a shared table. This is one of the intentions of Hygge, as I understand it. Some years ago, I attended an Old Order Mennonite church service, and these are the horse and buggy Mennonites. This was up near St. Jacob's. And I was invited to a member's home for Sunday lunch. Together with at least 10 others from the congregation, they had not received a spoken invitation. It was simply assumed that Esther Weber was hosting that day, although they probably would have said Isaac Weber, but it was really Esther hosting. Well, the men gathered in the visiting room for a bit of conversation and a quick pre-lunch snooze. The women bustled about preparing a long table with ample baking prepared the day before and many preserves pulled from the cupboards. Esther actually had a special cupboard with multiple long rolls of plastic table covering labeled according to how many people would be at the table on any given day. After the meal, of course, their labor continued while the men resumed their visiting and napping. Yet the women appeared joyful as they cleaned up the meal, appreciating the opportunity for shared work, but mainly the conversation and laughter, the relationships they nurtured. This is why we also come to church, what Sabbath rest is about, to express our faith together in community and just to socialize. For Jewish people, the Shabbat meal is a joyful time to be with family, friends, and guests. And in fact, for many Jews who are not otherwise practicing, the gathering of family for a shared ritual and meal is for many the highlight of Shabbat. I love the Old Order tradition, whereby people expect Sunday guests without invitation. There are unspoken understandings that households will take their turn being ready for any number of guests on Sunday dinner. Well, us modern urbanites might feel horror at the thought that we might receive uninvited guests for Sunday lunch. 5, 25? Maybe we should try it one week. And I had just finished writing this, and then I saw Andrea's announcement. And I thought, exactly that it. There must have been a wavelength between Queen Street and Brubaker, because that fits so perfectly. Thank you, Andrea. Well, here maybe the occasional potluck suffices. So may the Sabbath today be restful for you. May you engage in at least one form of redirection from routine that does some good in the world. And may you rest in the company of others, and ultimately with a God that shepherds and leads us to restful waters. Oh, and take a nap as well.